Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. First son Hunter Biden doesn't appear out of the woods yet. An IRS whistleblower now claims that he didn't pay taxes on undeclared money from his Burisma dealings nearly a decade ago. He might owe another $125,000 if his father's administration allows prosecutors to look at the case. For a third night, Paris and the rest of France saw violent protests to a police shooting of an immigrant teen. Today, President Macron is holding an emergency meeting on the situation. The play 1776 is opening at Washington's Kennedy Center with a twist. The production will feature only women, transgenders, and non-binary actors playing our all-male cast of founding fathers. And a cute Alabama kid's lemonade stand has been hit with violating child labor laws, if you can imagine that insanity. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
America's Voice Live, America's fastest growing news program. With Steve Gruber.
You've got to put America first. You do that by voting and bringing your friends to do the same.
Delivering the latest news, observations, and opinions. With the entire Real America's Voice team, America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber. Today is Friday, June 30th. Let's get today's top stories, and thank you for being here. Supreme Court is handing down victory after victory for conservatives. It's happening left and right. We'll have David Coleman here to talk about the outcomes of those cases, what it means going forward. Also, the House Oversight Committee, House Judiciary Committee, and the House Ways and Means Committee going after everyone and anyone involved in the years-long investigation into Hunter Biden and for all the games they played. And then later, Turning Point USA correspondent Anthony Watson will bring us a report on how New York Mayor Eric Adams is shipping people out of his so-called sanctuary city. Run along. We don't want you here. Those stories and much more on this Friday edition of America's Voice Live. Again, thank you for being here. It has not been a good week for Joe Biden or Hunter Biden or the entire team of Biden grifters that work under the umbrella of Biden Incorporated. No, it's been a tough few days. The bad news being fueled by the scandals surrounding the shady business deals of Hunter Biden, his sweetheart deal and misdemeanor charges for skipping out on paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal taxes, and for being very generous in what he considered a business expense in the first place. The whistleblower, the key whistleblower in the case, Gary Shapley, says Hunter should have been charged with much more serious crimes for the things he did, and apparently is going to get away with. And as I told you, the big leftist networks are not just ignoring the story. Bad news for Biden. Listen.
There were personal expenses that were taken as business expenses. Prostitutes, sex club memberships, hotel rooms for purported drug dealers.
How much did Hunter Biden owe in taxes?
So from 2014 to 2019, it was $2.2 million.
The back taxes were paid off, and last week, the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney in Delaware, David Weiss, reached an agreement with Hunter Biden. The president's son would admit to a firearm charge and plead guilty for his failure to pay taxes. If a judge signs off, the deal means no jail time.
So I guess that could be counted as a win for Hunter Biden, facing very serious crimes and getting off with no jail time. Hell, he didn't even pay all the money Shapley says he owed the IRS. In fact, he left a lot of it there. But they can't go after it now because of the statute of limitations. Thank God for slow walk-in. Like I've said before, when we have the IRS walking away from it for Hunter Biden, but when does that ever happen, really, to anybody else? The answer is it doesn't. And Shapley says much worse than that is the fact that David Weiss, the U.S. attorney in Delaware, was blocked repeatedly from bringing charges against Hunter in D.C. and California, and then being blocked from being a special prosecutor. Shapley says that is exactly what happened, no matter who says otherwise, including the Attorney General Merrick Garland. The strategy from the White House at the same time is to distract and deny when it comes to the whole Hunter Biden investigation. And if that doesn't work, just yell at the reporters asking those legitimate questions. Here's Joe.
President Biden, how involved were you in your son's Chinese shakedown text message? Were you sitting there? Were you involved?
No, I wasn't. I don't know.
Were you?
No.
No! Easy, Joe. It's not good for your heart, and we know how weak it is. Now, does that seem like the response of an innocent man to you? And look, we already know Joe Biden was lying about all of this. We know he was lying when he said he had nothing to do with his son's business deals. We have the proof that he did know. Payouts to the big guy, among other things. His family members getting paid by foreign entities for doing God only knows what. Hunter's text stating his dad was in the room with him as he demanded money during a shakedown of a Chinese businessman. Hunter's past business associates saying they know Joe Biden got paid out. Hunter even bought his dad a burner phone. And you don't use those unless you're trying to hide something. It's like a drug dealer's phone, right? And from there, the week did not get any better for Feeble Joe and the communists in the West Wing. When the Supreme Court delivered yet another constitutionally based decision on whether or not race could be a factor in college admissions, they decided to undermine the nation's high court, did the left. Here's Biden sitting down with MSNBC, and it did not go too well for him. See if you can spot the errors. Here it is.
Some of your former Senate colleagues on the Judiciary Committee would go as far as to say that it's anti-democratic. Do you agree with that?
Well, if I say it's anti-democratic, then it gets
in a lot of trouble.
No, but it is. Its value system is different, and its respect for institutions is different, and in that sense, it is not as embracing of all. What I think the Constitution says, we hold these truths we self. All men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator. It's the uniqueness of America. We never fully lived up to it. We never walked away from it. And this court seems to say that no, that's not always the case. The idea there's no right of privacy in the Constitution, giving states power that we fought a war over in 1860. I just think it's. This is not your father's Republican Party.
Wow, a lot to go through there. Okay, so first he confuses the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, which Nicole Wallace of MSNBC doesn't even try to correct because, let's face it, she probably doesn't know the difference either. And then he says we fought a war in 1960. Remember that one? Because I don't. Now, if he was trying to refer to the Civil War, well, that was 100 years earlier. And if he was trying to refer to the Civil Rights Movement as a war, well, he's got that wrong too. Although he does lie a lot about his role during the Civil Rights Movement, that I can tell you. Anyway, Joe continued his and the Democrats' crusade of destroying our republic by then bashing the Supreme Court. Of course, there's more for him to bash today because none of the court's major rulings went the socialist way again today. Obviously, we had affirmative action. Then you have religious freedom. A postal worker earlier this week successfully challenging the post office about working on Sundays, as well as the court today siding with a website designer who refused to make websites for same-sex weddings, and then the Biden student loan forgiveness plan that would have cost you and I $500 billion ruled unconstitutional as well. We'll get into all of that, by the way, coming up a little bit later in the program, but listen to this in the meantime.
You said today, and I know that you have a lot of power, but I can't imagine you manufactured the breaking news about the court. You said this court is not normal. What did you mean?
What I meant by that is it's done more to unravel basic rights and basic decisions than any court in recent history. And that's what I meant by not normal. It's gone out of its way to, for example, take a look at overruling Roe v. Wade. Take a look at what the decision today. Take a look at how it's ruled on a number of issues that have been precedent for 50, 60 years sometimes. And that's what I meant by not normal.
Well, and after all that, and Joe Biden informed, Joe's brain wanders into the looking glass with Alice and wanders into the weeds somewhere, where he has false memories of greatness in his past. I'm Joe Biden. It really is sad, and even more sad is that MSNBC and others just sit there, knowing that what they're hearing is flat-out false lies, and not caring enough to correct it, not caring enough about the viewers to make any corrections at all, in fact. This is exactly what agenda-driven lapdog journalism looks like and sounds like. Here it is.
I was teaching at the University of Pennsylvania, and I had a significant budget to hire a lot of people for the Biden democracy up there, from Tony Blinken to others that came along.
Yeah, the guy never taught one class, not one. But of course, MSNBC doesn't challenge him on that, or his $1 million salary for doing nothing at all. $1 million for doing nothing, never taught a single class. Bet that's a job you'd like to have. And does it really shock you that this kind of corrupt, incoherent mess of a president sports racial quotas? Doesn't surprise me. Here's more.
We cannot let this decision be the last word. I want to emphasize, we cannot let this decision be the last word. While the court can render a decision, it cannot change what America stands for.
Yep, in the Democrat minds, America stands for racial quotas, for racism. And that the color of your skin is the most important single thing, more important than anything else. Another part of Joe's really bad, terrible, awful, rotten week, the poll numbers that continue to flounder around in the toilet as he is the most unpopular president in modern times. By far the most unpopular president in modern times. And there's no end in sight for his failures in policy and polling. I guess he could look at the bright side. He is liked more than Kamala Harris. But then again, so is roadkill. Listen.
And I think and the other thing is, Nicole, there's a lot of good that's happening. For example, 60-some% of the American people have greater job satisfaction than they've had in the high, 15th or whatever the number is, 30 years. I know the polling numbers are not good, but they were the same way when I ran and won. Everybody thought I was going to get clobbered in a primary. I got 80 million votes in the last election. And with the same thing, I remember I was saying that I thought the Democratic Party was going to do extremely well in the off-year election. Yeah. And other than the Bushes, it did. I mean, it was a great victory by not having a significant loss. We're going to lose 40 seats and all that.
Let me tell you, Nicole, Joey made a mess. Okay, now Joe tried to offer an olive branch. Sorry, it's Friday. Joe tried to offer an olive branch to some Republicans, but I think it's more like a sprig of poison hemlock. Then he just wanders away on live TV. He just got up, wandered off to the studio. Strange, very strange. Check this out.
Well, this ain't your father's Republican Party.
It is not. I can attest to that.
All right, well,
if you ever need a witness, I can attest to that. Thank you very much.
But by the way, there's still a lot of really good Republicans.
Out in the country.
No,
yes.
And in the Senate.
Who?
Well, I think Mitt Romney's the first guy. There's a lot of them, but not Mitt, but others have come to me since I've been elected. Now it's 6 Republican senators. 2 came at one time and the other 4 alone. To tell me, Joe, I agree with you. But if I'm seen to do it, I lose a primary. It's not a profile in courage, but I think, you know me, I'm an eternal optimist. I still think there's going to come a moment when they're going to be able to break. And by the way, remember I said we could still do bipartisan things? They said they couldn't do it. Well, we didn't get a lot, but we got a lot of bipartisan things done.
And now they're running on your bipartisan accomplishment. I think that's a sign.
Like I said, I'm going to be down there congratulating you. I said I'd be a president for every American, whether they voted for me or not.
Well, and the ones that didn't vote for your bills but run on them.
That's right.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate
it's great to have you.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. It's a very exciting day around here. We'll have reaction and analysis to everything we just heard from the president. We'll be back after a short break.
Then he does that old man shuffle thing that he does. And he loves this. This father's Republican Party. But look, more and more Americans are waking up to the fact that this is not your father's Democrat Party. It's not even the Democrat Party of just 10 years ago. These people have gone berserk. They've gone overboard. It's frightening. And Joe's no good, very bad week is just one more week in his no good, very bad presidency. A presidency that should end sooner rather than later if America has any sense at all. Well, you certainly have more sense than what we just witnessed, don't we? Coming up after the break, after the ruling on affirmative action, plus the rulings today likely will ignite calls from the left to hack the court. We've got to change the Supreme Court. We must. Well, Attorney David Kallman will join me from the Great Lakes Justice Center to break it all down. Coming up next on America's Voice Live. I can hear the shrieking and the screaming and the gnashing of teeth and the clenching of fingers. Oh, good Lord. The left is spinning out again today. The Supreme Court ending its very eventful week on another high note, blocking President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. Also today, ruling that a website designer doesn't have to make wedding websites for same-sex couples if she doesn't want to based on her religious preferences. And speaking of religious freedom, a postal worker also won yesterday after refusing to work Sundays for the Postal Service because of his religious beliefs. This after another ruling that affirmative action or race-based admissions has no place in our country's institutions of higher learning. A lot going on. Joining me live to discuss all of these decisions in full, a lawyer from the Great Lakes Justice Center, David Coleman. David, good to have you back on the program.
Great to be with you, Steve.
Let's talk about religious liberty. Religious liberty in this country had a very good week. What do you say?
Yeah, two very important decisions came out. In fact, the most recent one just today was the web designer Lori Smith out of Colorado. You'd think Colorado would get the message, after the Masterpiece Cake decision and now this one. But, this decision is a very firm and strong opinion affirming the First Amendment and the right to free speech, that you have the right to think the way you want to think and the right to say what you think without government coercion. It was a resounding win for free speech today.
Yeah, Colorado, as you point out, David, a little slow on the uptake. Now, let's dismiss some of the myths, some of the dishonest reviews coming from the left. This doesn't mean houses of public accommodation can reject somebody because of their race or because they're gay from using a hotel room. That's not what happened here. It doesn't mean that biracial couples are going to be denied access to web services. Doesn't mean that either. Tell the people exactly what this means.
Yeah, none of that is true. That's just hysteria. And the dissent tried to foment that in that opinion, but the majority opinion really shoots that down and makes it clear this is only dealing with speech. And this web designer was being forced or compelled to speak only what the government approved in the area of marriage. This person only believes that one man, one woman marriage, and so did not want to design web creative, artistic things that she would put out there that violated her religious beliefs and violated her free speech. So that's all the court said. It doesn't do any of those other things. That's just hysteria.
Yeah, let me ask you about this part of it. Clarence Thomas, the once stoic justice who almost never spoke in public, didn't take the bench often, didn't ask a lot of questions. Oh boy, has he come out of his shell. Boy, he's got a lot to say these days. Reading opinions from the bench, taking on the newest associate justice. He's not holding back at all, is he?
No, he sure is not. He wrote a pretty blistering response to Justice Brown, that's in the affirmative action case. And Justice Thomas was pretty direct and blunt. It's funny, Steve, this the hysteria over the affirmative action case is just as overblown. All that case said is that the race cannot be used as a factor in college admissions. Now, here in Michigan, we've had that already for 10 years. We had a ballot initiative and changed our constitution and barred race from being used as a factor for admissions to colleges or universities. So it really doesn't.
That happened a decade ago. Yeah, that happened a decade ago. So of these cases, all right, so the affirmative action case, which, by the way, Harvard is already trying to figure out how to cheat, basically. How to cheat on this. Well, if they just write an essay about their experiences from their racial background and their ethnicity and so forth, well, you can let them in. It's not what it says here, guys. You're going to have a lot of trouble with that. But it does open the door. This one, the affirmative action case, the no work on Sunday case, and the website case, there's going to be a flurry of lawsuits, David. There's going to be lawsuits filed in every direction because this is a long way from being fully settled out, isn't it?
It is. But it's setting standards, Steve, that are going to be much better and easier to follow. I agree with Justice Scalia when he said on the affirmative action side of this case, he said, well, if you want to end discrimination, then stop discriminating. That's how you stop discriminating based on race, is you just don't do it. And so
stop discriminating based on race. Stop using race as a determinative factor in all of these issues. Now, here's my question to you. And I've asked this of a couple others, but I want your take on this. Okay, so you take these cases and you look at DEI now, especially with the affirmative action case, the coercing of speech case, and you take people that, let's say they work for the public university, and you drag them into a room and you tell them if they're white, they're racist, if they're black, they're a victim, and you force feed this to people. Then you allow black students to be graduated separately. Segregation, returning us to a time of segregation, giving black and brown students a so-called safe space that white people are not allowed in on college campuses. This is not determinative, these decisions, but it can be awfully persuasive, from my understanding. What say you?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You're going to see this whole premise of the affirmative action case is going to spread out, I think, into other areas. Like you say, DEI. How can you have diversity, equity, inclusion based on race now? Because the Supreme Court has made it clear you can't use it as a factor for affirmative action. Then how should it be a factor for DEI and things like that? So you're right. I think you're going to see a lot of cases coming down the pike. I've had calls just this week from employees, one in the government sector and one in the private sector, and being forced to take these DEI training sessions. And they're very antagonistic to people of faith and wanting to know what they can do. Given some of these rulings this week, I think you're going to have a lot more ability to push back and fight back on this kind of mandated groupthink, which is all DEI is.
Yeah, the bottom line, diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do you have the inclusion portion of it if you specifically exclude white people or anybody else for that matter? You specifically exclude them from certain graduations, from certain safe spaces, from certain activities on public, taxpayer-funded campuses across this country. How do you have inclusion by excluding people? I mean, it's just such an oxymoron, isn't it?
It is. I take that as a rhetorical question, Steve. I mean, obviously, the answer is yes. It's clear. And I think these decisions this week bear that out. And even the way they interpreted Title VII under the Groff case on the postal worker, that, should there be a religious accommodation for a worker in the workplace? And they have now changed and clarified that standard, that employers cannot discriminate against anyone based on their religious faith or beliefs in the workplace unless it actually causes an undue hardship to the business and the conduct of the business. And that's
that's now the standard, right? And one more quick thing, and that's the one that came down last, the student loan forgiveness. You can't do that. It is Congress's job to acquire debts and figure out how to pay for debts. The executive, the president, doesn't have the right, with the stroke of a pen, to burden the American taxpayers with $500 billion of new debt. That's what we learned today. Of course, we already knew that, but the left goes crazy. I'll give you the last word on that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. President Biden was trying to argue his administration that the HEROES Act that had been passed by Congress dealing with educational subsidies, payments, things like that, authorized the president somehow to stop or to give away, debt relief to all students out there. That act had nothing to do with that at all. And yet they just made it up and said, the law allows us to do this. No, it doesn't. And the Supreme Court said very clearly, without congressional authority to act, the executive branch can't act. It's that simple. And it's clear to anybody who looked at this issue, nobody should be surprised at this decision today. And if folks want to have student debt relief, go to Congress and get it passed. They won't be able to. But that's the way it's operating.
And if they can, great. But if you can't, you don't get to legislate through the courts. That's the point.
Exactly.
David?
Through the
really
president.
Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be with you.
Greatly appreciated. Thank you, sir. All right. After the break, House Republicans demanding more than a dozen federal officials appear before multiple congressional committees for transcribed interviews. Why? Because they know what's going on. They have smoking guns. We'll talk about it straight ahead on America's Voice Live. right, good to have you here on a Friday on the verge of Independence Day weekend, even though 4th of July is Tuesday. This is the weekend to celebrate. The House Oversight Committee, House Judiciary Committee, and the House Ways and Means Committee are now going after everyone and anyone involved in the years-long investigation into Hunter Biden, if it really was an investigation. Doesn't sound like it from many regards. From the IRS, the committees are requesting testimony from a director in the IRS's criminal division, Michael Batorf, and the special agent in charge of the Washington field office, Darrell Walden, based on the IRS's whistleblower Gary Shapley's testimony. All Secret Service employees who received an alleged tip-off from Shapley's testimony are also being called upon by the committees. The House Judiciary Committee, led by Jim Jordan, is taking on the Justice Department and the FBI. House Oversight Committee, led by James Comer, is taking on the Secret Service, and the House Ways and Means Committee, led by Jason Smith, is taking on the IRS straight up and straight on. I mentioned this in the last segment just a bit, but here it is. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, his response to fellow Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissenting opinion yesterday spared no punches. Justice Jackson dissented to the court's ruling yesterday that knocked down race-based admissions at colleges and universities, calling it "let them eat cake" obliviousness, and referring to her colleagues as detached from the country's past and present experiences. And boy, oh boy, did Justice Thomas have a word or two for her. He responded in part by, quote, "Justice Jackson's race-infused worldview falls flat at each step. Individuals are the sum of their unique experiences, challenges, and accomplishments. What matters is not the barriers they face, but how they choose to confront them. And the race is not to blame for everything, good or bad, that happens in their lives." He went on to describe her worldview as myopic or nearsighted, and as nothing short of racial determinism. He says this tried and failed system defies both law and reason, as Jackson's opinion seems to suggest that disadvantages can only be viewed through the race lens. That's it. And then can only be solved through race-based solutions. That's it. Not taking anything else into account. It was pretty flat-out offensive, honestly. Meanwhile, across the border in Ukraine, President Zelensky says the nation won't be holding its elections next year. Ukraine's constitution bars elections from being held during martial law. Zelensky's 5-year term ends in March, but the country is prepared for him to lead during the duration of the war. Nice way to declare yourself in charge for the rest of the ride. Zelensky declared martial law for the first time last year in February when Russia invaded, and has extended it 7 times since. No signs that he'll be ending it anytime soon. Each extension lasts 90 days. The last extension made in May is set to end in August, but of course it'll get extended again. PACE, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, is urging the country to hold elections anyway by amending their constitution or ending martial law, but Ukraine's leaders, including the National Security Secretary, have said they have no intentions of that happening. No elections will be taking place. Gee, how convenient, Mr. Zelensky, standing there accepting $200 billion in American aid and has no intentions of giving up the keys to not only the castle, but to the safe. Coming up after the break, what exactly is a sanctuary city? Well, if you ask New York Mayor Eric Adams, it means something apparently a lot different than he used to say, depending on where you are, of course. TP USA correspondent Anthony Watson will join me with that story. It's coming up next on America's Voice Live. NIMBY, not in my backyard. Oh, it's so true sometimes, isn't it? Remarkable when hypocrisy comes to town. New documents reveal that New York City Mayor Eric Adams spent $50,000 in taxpayer funds to send illegal aliens anywhere but the Big Apple. He sent them to Florida and Texas and even to South America and China. After slamming governors and border states for transporting illegals to, well, places like his so-called sanctuary city. Mayor Adams relocated 114 illegal families so far to a location of their choosing. The most common destinations were Florida, receiving 28 families, Texas, which got 14. And don't forget, weeks ago, Mayor Adams accused border state governors of playing politics with people's lives and intentionally hurting black-run cities. Oh, come on. Here with us to discuss Mayor Adams' so-called sanctuary city policies is Turning Point USA correspondent Anthony Watson. Anthony, good to see you again, my friend.
Steve, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure.
You know, it is remarkable. Mayor Eric Adams is, his dishonesty knows no bounds. I mean, here he is, a guy who says, we will accept this, and then we have an emergency because we can't afford this, because we can't really accept this. And then if you send people here, you're a criminal. But if I send people somewhere, I'm doing the right thing. This guy's a mess, Anthony.
Well, of course, and it's the same thing that we've been saying for months and weeks and days this entire time when sanctuary cities became sanctioned. Everyone knew that they were kind of a bad idea when you started seeing more crime, more murders, more chaos starting to uprise from illegal immigrants that now have plagued these cities. And it was all a ploy, literally, to now slant elections and do everything else, because when you pack a city filled with people that now can't get their case read and can't be reached, they disappear into the wind. And then we, as the American people, become responsible for paying that. And so what I've been saying time and time again is that people fail to realize that this is where you exercise your rights, because as a public servant, as a mayor, Eric Adams is now held accountable to the people who put him in office. And he's been saying for the longest time that we need to do our due diligence to everybody else. And he finally realized what we've all been saying this entire time, is that it is unsustainable when you don't print money, when you don't punch a time clock, and you can't just pull money out of thin air, because now you take it off of the plates of the people that are actually paying to be here and make it their responsibility to cover all of the families that are here illegally.
And then you take a couple of other factors and throw them in. Factors like taking veterans and tossing them out of hotels where they've been residing, because the hotels get offered a whole lot more money to take the illegals in. You see, for a lot of people, Anthony, and people don't seem to understand this, it is a business deal. This is a business plan for Bethany Christian Services and Catholic Social Services and hotels that have vacancies, because the government is offering a whole lot of money per person, per day, every day that they're housed and taken care of and fed and given a shower and something to do. $200, $300, $400 per person per day. You run the numbers. Pretty simple to get to some really eye-popping bottom line numbers for all of these so-called charities, Anthony.
Well, of course, and it's unsustainable. It makes no sense in any business structure to bring somebody in that does absolutely nothing, offers absolutely nothing, but drains everything and takes everything. That is not something you can sustain, because sooner or later, when you run out of resources, when you run out of space, when you run out of room, somebody's going to have to sacrifice or have things stripped from them in order to make that pathway possible. And in the cases that we've seen right now, it's not working for anybody involved, especially the people of New York that have lived there, the veterans that have now been dishomed and dislodged from places where they have served this country to actually make a way for real Americans, when you see everybody else. And now, in the dead of night, and all of these uncanny ways, you're now starting to see, the mayor of New York City now start to shuffle people under the radar, start to put them all in the other places where he knows that there are heavy things against that, and then all in the guise of being like, oh, I'm just trying to help everybody else. But you're a sanctuary city. He's sending into Florida. Florida doesn't have any sanctuary cities. Texas doesn't have any sanctuary cities. He's even sent people back to South America when they've come across the border and been shipped here, sent them back home, and then sent people to China. That should be a wake-up call to all of the people here coming in. All of these people that swear up and down that they're here for you are literally just using you for themselves, and then you're the ones that are going to pay the ultimate price in the end for their reasons and their gain in the end.
And then I want to look just for a moment toward the city of Chicago, where residents there were appalled here in the last few weeks. You probably saw some of this on TV, same as I did. Appalled that local elementary schools will be turning into homeless encampments. The playgrounds being closed to local kids in Chicago and turned over to illegal children here because they had to house them somewhere because Joe Biden's failing policies at the border continued to plague every big city in America. Every big city in America and small towns, too, paying the price for this very reckless policy. Chicago, by the way, while they're turning elementary schools into places to hold these illegals, have had 1,446 people shot through this day. 288 shot and killed in Chicago. It's a shooting gallery. They don't have crime under control, but man, they're turning elementary schools into sanctuary schools for illegals. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Oh, of course. And it's unfair to the people who literally deserve the best treatment. Chicago once was a beautiful city that was a staple in American history. Now it's a city like California, New York, and all of these other liberal-run cities where people are fleeing by the masses out of there because there are failed policies. Law-abiding citizens are the ones that are being penalized, and they're the ones that stand the most risk when you don't punish crime, you don't, hold people accountable for it, and you don't make pathways for the law-abiding citizens to actually flourish and have a good life out there. So what can someone expect from a place like Chicago that was already a murder capital in the United States, now plummeting economically and socially due to the guise of people trying to make way for people wanting the American dream, when people who live here that want the American dream for themselves are being told that they have to take a back seat and wait just for more people to stay in power by being a charity for those that don't support our customs and do more harm once they get here.
Sure.
And the beautiful thing in all of that was what you saw and what we saw, where we saw a community of people that were outraged at the people who were making all of the decisions. When you saw them in those meetings saying like, oh, we'll have about 2,500 illegal immigrants here, we'll house about 1,500 in this school, in this district, and you saw a bunch of elderly people, from the elderly to the young, that go to those schools, parents, adults, dads, moms, grandparents, all of them, community leaders, business owners, saying that this is not right. And that is the rights that I encourage everyone to remember, that here in America, public servants, school boards, your mayors, your governors, your senators, everyone who is in public office, that is exactly what they are, public servants. And everyone right now keeps trying to sway the conversation to America being a democracy, which is the people in charge tell the people below this is how it is and that's how it's going to be. And that is not how things are run here. So when there are meetings, show up and speak your voice. When there are things happening behind closed doors, you stay outside behind those closed doors until you get the answers that you need, because there's a lack of transparency, and it's because the American people are now being strong-armed into submission rather than being elevated to be the people that we were originally created to be.
And the real question, Anthony, becomes, will there be a political price to pay come November 5th, 2024? I believe there will be. Because I believe communities in places like Chicago are going to say, you know what, we're done with this. We're done with getting used and abused by the Democrats as we have been for decades. We're out. We'll see what happens. But Anthony, thank you for being here. Have a terrific weekend.
Stephen, happy 4th of July to you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All right, up after the break, we're going to stay with the mayor to start the next segment. It looks like Mayor Eric Adams may have stepped in it by rebuking an older lady who was addressing him. Oh, this is great. Oh, I'm so happy we get to see this again. Find out what he said, what she said, coming up next on AVL. Well, if you missed this one, you missed some fireworks early on this 4th of July weekend. At a community meeting in New York City's Washington Heights Wednesday, Mayor Eric Adams called one of his elderly white constituents on a fixed income a plantation owner. Oh, yeah, classic move here. Adams said, "I'm the mayor of this city, and treat me with the respect that would deserve to be treated. I'm speaking to you as an adult. Don't stand in front like you treated someone that's on the plantation that you own." Oh, yeah, it's quite classy. Listen.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about the rent guidelines for it. You said before and after that you supported those rent increases. In Nassau, they had a 0% rent increase. Why in New York City, where the real estate is controlling you, Mr. Mayor, why are we having these horrible rent increases last year and this year?
Okay, first, if you're going to ask a question, don't point at me and don't be disrespectful to me. I'm the mayor of this city, and treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated. I'm speaking to you as an adult. Don't stand in front like you treated someone that's on the plantation that you own. Give me the respect I deserve and engage in a conversation up here in Washington Heights. Treat me with the same level of respect I treat you. So don't be pointing at me. Don't be disrespectful to me. Speak with me as an adult, because I'm a grown man. I walked into this room as a grown man, and I'm going to walk out of this room as a grown man.
Well, you sure didn't act like one there. You acted like a snowflake. The National Director of Engagement at the National Education Fund, Juan Rosa, responded to Adams with this tweet. This woman is Jeannie Dubnow, the co-founder of the Riverside Edgecombe Neighborhood Association, a tenants and housing rights advocacy organization in Upper Manhattan. She has plus 40 years of advocating for low-income New Yorkers of all races. Jeannie is not a racist, and this was wrong. 84-year-old Jeannie Dubnow is a Holocaust survivor and a microbiologist at Rutgers. Dubnow told Forward, a Jewish independent nonprofit, her mother was 9 months pregnant when they fled Nazi Germany for Brussels in 1938. Her family then fled to France and was sponsored by an uncle to come to the United States. Dubnow said, and I quote, "I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what the mayor has done as an enemy of the tenants. He was deflecting. He was trying to get away from that." Dubnow says Adams is a landlord himself. He, Adams, got millions from the real estate industry, and he's paying them back. He's as corrupt as that. Ah, yes, Adams. He, apparently, is the plantation owner. Talk about projection on that white woman. Oh, you're white? Let me just go ahead and attack you. Right. Syracuse University is hosting a summer writing workshop sponsored by Colored Convos Media and co-sponsored and founded by Assistant Professor of Political Science Jen M. Jackson, who will also be teaching the workshop. The classes start July 8th, run through the end of August. The program promotes their Black and queer-owned and operated media company. It's dedicated to providing support to Black and queer writers and content creators, the web page states. While you do not have to be queer to participate in the spaces, you do have to be Black. And you must be committed to centering and honoring the lives and experiences of all queer and trans people. The summer classes will cost you a mere $40 for workshops and $75 for their full summer intensive weekend writing program. Do they know this is racist? I mean, do they understand this? Do they think they won't get caught, or they just don't care? Go with they just don't care part, because that's what I'm going with. 250 celebrities, influencers, and prominent public figures signed a 765-word letter sent to prominent big tech media platforms demanding censorship of what they consider to be hate speech against the trans agenda. Alyssa Milano, Amy Schumer, Bob the Drag Queen. Oh, of course, Bob the Drag Queen's there, wouldn't he be? Peppermint, Our Lady J, and many others sent the letter to the CEOs of Meta, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter, calling both content and ads dangerous, claiming a systemic failure to prohibit hate, harassment, and malicious anti-LGBTQ disinformation that must be addressed. It's always so dire, isn't it? They're always so dramatic. I'd say drama queens, but that'd probably be offensive. The letter says targeting, misgendering, and dead naming as bullying and harassing prominent people is a mode of hate speech. Oh, shush. Dead naming is calling a person by their birth name, because I guess that's offensive. Good Lord. Alyssa Milano, get your medication. You're running low. I'm just here to help. Back to the news after a quick break and a message from our sponsor. With Joe Biden in the Oval Office, we've seen inflation surge, deficit spending, and the national debt have hit record highs. It's directly because of these challenges that President Trump recently warned our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat in 200 years. Now, in a direct affront to the dollar's status as global reserve currency, the BRICS group of nations led by China and Russia are rumored to be just a couple of months away from launching their own currency. With the dollar seemingly on its last legs, it's more important than ever to take a hard look at moving some of your savings into gold. And you can own gold in a tax-sheltered retirement account with the help of Birch Gold Group. That's right, Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. And the best part? You don't pay a penny out of pocket. To get started, Birch Gold giving away a free information kit on gold. Just text the word America to 989898. Think about this. When currencies fail, gold is a safe haven, and much more time, and how much more time, I should say, does the dollar have, especially with BRICS looming overhead? Protect your savings. Birch Gold has an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of satisfied customers. Text America to the number 989898. Get your free information kit on gold. Text America to 989898. After the break, a story that reminds us of just how wonderful this country is as we go into the 4th of July weekend. Plus your answers to the America's Voice question of the day. I'll be back. All right, here's a story that'll make you feel good about America because we do that every day here. What's wonderful about America? How about this? After moving to Texas from the East Coast, a family adopted a neighborhood senior who jumped in to welcome them. Shireen Caraballo and her husband met 82-year-old Paul Callahan last year when Wilson began working on their recently purchased home, and Paul offered him a ladder to work with. From then on, it didn't take very long for the family of 8 and their new neighbor to become close, and for Paul to take on the role of de facto grandfather. Look.
Paul, you walked him back across the street?
Hey, children are precious.
See you later.
I mean, you know, there isn't a large commodity of them sometimes.
See you.
Bye.
Being naughty, Paul.
Paul's wife sadly had passed away about 6 months before the family moved into the neighborhood. And Shireen says her family provided an important refuge for Paul. Caraballos and Paul now see each other every other day, inviting him to all family cookouts. They spend every holiday together, and this Father's Day, Paul received a new outfit from the family as a present. Shireen's kids love Paul as much as she does, and the elderly man makes great efforts to make them feel at home, too. Shireen once asked what drew him to us, and he said that he grew up around lots of kids. His house was always about kids, and kids just hang out. Paul's the last of his siblings who have all passed. But this just proves in America, family is always just one kind gesture away. Just one. My friends, that is my America right there. All right, a couple of quick question of the day answers. The evidence mounting against Joe Biden and Merrick Garland. Will they face accountability? Well, Pam Miller says get Miles Guo before Congress so he can give names and receipts of the billions the Bidens have received from the CCP. Nicole Sy keeps asking for Congress to act. Why won't they? Good question. Roy Howes. I seriously doubt it. Mark Teal writes, the Republicans don't have the stones to do anything about the corruption. In my opinion, 60 to 70% of Republicans and 95% of the Democrats are on the take, too. All right, we're going to leave it there for today. Listen, be safe this holiday weekend. If there are red flags and you're at a beach, don't go in the water. Those undercurrents can be deadly. Rip tides and rip currents can be dangerous and deadly to you, your kids, and people around. Be careful out there. Don't drink too much. Keep your head about you, all right? We need you back here next week. I sincerely believe that. Have a great 4th of July. Celebrate. Honor this country, the greatest country in American history. We'll see you back here next week. Have a great weekend. I'm Steve Gruber.